And greetings once again. Welcome to the Silence of Our Friends, our Monday evening offering, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and you are streaming with us live. You can really help our process and help our goals by reaching out and sharing right now the link. If you're over on YouTube, share the link with 2 or 3 friends and make certain that they know we're here and we will know that they're there. Welcome them to the comment section. Welcome them to sharing their show ideas. Welcome to them to sharing their personal stories about disparities and inequities of people, black and brown, in these yet to be United States. If there are people outside of the black and brown community that have particular interests who are following us, we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear about your questions, hear about your concerns. And even if we disagree, there is a space and place and time where you can disagree with people agreeably and not to be disrespectful. I believe that if persons make a decision to be lifelong students of life, to learn something new every day, that there's a position and place in time where we can learn something from everyone and learn something from each other. So help us over on the YouTube side. We appreciate you sharing the link if you're watching, viewing, live stream, Facebook Live, on my personal page, George M. Matthews II. Welcome to the show tonight, our episode. I'm going to give you the topic in just one moment's time, but please, let's do a little housekeeping and make certain we are sharing the page and sharing your comments, sharing your questions, sharing particular life events, life stories even. We have people who are helping us to gather a body of information so that we can present balanced ideas and balanced understanding to people, black and brown, our community, our demographic in this society, these yet to be United States. And there's much the rest of the world, particularly the United States, can learn from people of color, relegated to our experiences here, our experience and experiences here in America. So welcome. We appreciate you being right where you are. Help the channel grow and help the channel to remain strong. The Silence of Our Friends. We were not here last Monday. I did something I rarely do. I took the evening off because I felt it was necessary to do so. And the week before, we started with this particular show topic, which was Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. And many times, in the face of the opposition of black and brown people here in America, where the uprising and the accent has been here recently in days of late, probably more so since the heinous murdering of Mr. George Floyd by officers not of color. And it's kind of stirred up a consciousness, much like it was in the days of the fledgling beginning of the civil rights movement here in Birmingham, Alabama, when the worldwide audience by way of television had an opportunity to see Bull Connor and his egregious, heinous treatment of people of color in Birmingham, Alabama, with the dogs, the fire hoses, and the paddy wagons, as they were then known, the arrests, and there were multiple arrests of the children of the movement. It was there was an awakening of the consciousness. First of all, an awareness, then an awakening, because the rest of the world lived in a capsule and did not know then about the treatment, as it were, of people of color, the disrespect, the inequities, the demoralization, the pejorative actions regarding people of color. The rest of the world just didn't know. And so television aided in bringing the rest of the world into the real experiences that people of color, black and brown, were receiving every day. And then secondly, it brought not only an awareness, but then an awakening to people that did know of just how brutal this post-slavery, post-Civil War world was, and in many instances still is. I believe the Black Lives Matter movement, on the heels of Mr. George Floyd's murder, has done the same, brought an awakening to our world as well as an awareness. And so we're here today to speak to this rhetoric, this response. And to me, it's a bit of an inhumane one that comes from the other side of the fence, where, the political side as well as the ethnic side, when they hear the name of the movement, the dubbed title of the movement, Black Lives Matter, it awakens something in them, and their retort, their response back is, well, all lives matter, particularly believers, Christians. And so on that note, our topic tonight more specifically is roll call. We're going to call the roll tonight. And before we get to all of that, let's do our general opening. Many people would say to me, you're a pastor, George Matthews, your hands are full. You pastor 2 thriving congregations. You have, outside of this global crisis, you have a fairly healthy traveling schedule. You're afforded the opportunity to minister to other pastors and other church congregations, all of which I'm very, very grateful and humbled to carry out my assignment in the kingdom of God and the body of Christ. Along with that, however, many people would say to me, just do the church thing and leave society alone. Leave the societal issues, leave the norms and values, leave the mores of society. Leave that to sociologists, leave that to the psychologists, psychotherapists, the activists, leave that to the politicians, because you're out of your field. Well, apparently someone forgot to either read the Bible, and then there are believers who are entrenched with the same sort of idea. Someone either has not read the Bible, not read it all the way through cover to cover, which I have several times, by the way, or perhaps they have read the Bible. And we did a show once on rose-tinted glasses, however you whatever types of lenses you wear will formulate your worldview. But nonetheless, to that person or those persons who would say that to me, that I'm out of my field of expertise, or perhaps even out of my field, which would require my interest or dictate my interest. Here's another prong in this support to do what I'm attempting to do. The entire book of Esther, Esther, is dedicated to the story of God using a Jewess, a female Hebrew, ethnically speaking, elevated to the position of the Queen of Persia. She is the wife of Ahasuerus, and she is used by God to thwart the genocidal murder, the entire plotted, schemed murder of her people. An ethnic story where a woman used of God is directed and assigned to speak truth to power regarding ethnic issues. It's just that simple. Esther 4:14, Mordecai, who serves as her uncle, advises her that she was come to the kingdom for such a time as this. My God, a Jewish person from the ethnicity of the Hebrews, the chosen people of God, and in this time, at this time, under the Old Testament, these were only people to whom and God was dealing, with which God was dealing, the Jewish nation. And so these chosen people of God have become narrowed all the way down to this one Jewess woman, and God raises her up to speak to political issues. Mordecai said to her, Esther 4:14, did you not know that you were brought to the kingdom for such a time as this? In essence, he says to her, he said, Esther, they don't know you're a Jew. You're passing, and that's an old phrase, quote unquote, passing, as some other ethnicity. But he said, this is an issue regarding your people. And if you are not used by God, if you don't relinquish your abilities to God, if you don't cooperate with God, watch what he says. He says, in essence, if you're silent, God will bring deliverance from another place. In other words, there's a correlation between silence and deliverance. In other words, if the people of God are silent, then God has to raise up deliverance from elsewhere, because he is about deliverance. The deliverance must come, but it is connected to the refusal of his people to be silent. Let's go on. So we're going to get to this show. There are a few things I need to repeat every show. As an opening, Dr. King made the statement, in the end, what will be remembered will not be the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. I'll repeat it. In the end, what will be remembered will not be the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends, those would-be friends. Remember, Jesus was killed, murdered by the Roman government, but it happened at the hands of his Jewish brethren because they were silent. All the miracles, he healed people. St. Matthew chapter 15, everyone that was brought to him in one specific town, he healed them all. They were blind, halt, withered, maimed, missing body part, silent. What happened to the 10 lepers, of which Jesus healed each, and the one he made whole as well as healed? Silent. Where was the woman with issues, the woman with the issue of blood that was healed immediately? Jairus, where was he? Where was Mrs. Jairus? Where was Talitha, the daughter that was raised from the dead? Where was Lazarus, Mary, and Martha? Where was the woman who had the Canaanite woman whose daughter was grievously tormented and Jesus healed her? Where was the centurion? He worked for the Roman government and Jesus healed his servant. See, all these people were silent, and because of which Jesus, our conquering king, was murdered. The silence of our friends, those friends, quote unquote, of Jesus were silent. Nothing in the world, Dr. King said in other places, more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Two kingdoms, two worlds, two epic proportions that of classes where people fall. They're either sincerely ignorant or conscientiously stupid. Sincere ignorant, they just don't know. There's good people, well-intentioned people, but they just don't know. They're trying to speak to issues of which they have no insight, no experience, no reach, no touch, no felt value. Or they're conscientiously stupid. Stupid because, just the word that he used, they with thought, with education, they with learning, they with exposure, yet make the decision to conform to ideologies and idioms that are less than fair, less than equitable. And so here's another person. I found this on a tattered piece of paper. I wrote it years ago, from Benjamin Elijah Mays, an American Baptist minister, civil rights leader, credited with laying the intellectual foundation of the civil rights movement. He makes this statement, and I read it somewhere, copied it down. If you're ignorant, the world is going to cheat you. If you're weak, the world is going to kick you. If you're a coward, the world is going to keep you running. I'll repeat it. If you're ignorant, the world is going to cheat you. If you're weak, the world is going to kick you. If you're a coward, the world is going to keep you running. So the premise of our show, of course, is to answer the question, why? Superior minds address the interrogative question of why. Average minds deal with what, when, how. But the superior minded person, to get to the root of it, has to address and bring answers to why. Why are people of color generally treated unfairly and have been since their imprisoned, the kidnapped arrival into these yet to be United States? So we're dealing tonight with economic and law enforcement inequities. Economic and law enforcement inequities. My question tonight is, what gives? It's a question of racial equality in America. When people respond to Black Lives Matter as a statement or as the dubbing of that particular activist group, and they respond by saying all lives matter, they in essence have said the truth. Yes, all lives matter to God. But the question and the real issue is of the one of mattering to the extent, do all lives matter equitably? Are all lives mattering to us all with the same worth, the same value as the majority population here in these yet to be United States? Allow me to repeat this. Keep in mind that the fathers and framers of this country were all white, and at the same time the country was founded, slaves were being kidnapped and regularly brought to America. Of the fathers and framers, 41 of the 56 signers of the Constitution, or at least the Declaration of Independence, were all slavers. 41 out of 56. That only left 15 people out of 56 who did not, back at the plantation, own slaves, have some affinity toward slavery, while the hypocrisy was, many of which outcried against slavery. They were abolitionists, they called themselves, but they owned slaves. I'm going to do a show on that because there was this tension between the abolition of slavery, leaving those slave owners with the big question, what do I now do? How do I restore an equity to people that I once owned? And now how do I go about commerce? And so they were torn. And so they made the choice, for whatever reason, to be abolitionists with their voices. But at the same time, they maintained ownership of slaves. It was called peculiar institution. It loomed over largely over the first few decades of American presidential history. I told you this the last time we were together, but because we skipped last week, I want to bring you back up to speed. Not only did enslaved laborers help build the White House, all of the earliest presidents, except for John Adams and his son John Quincy Adams, owned enslaved people, black people. George Washington kept some 300 bondsmen, slaves, at his Mount Vernon plantation. Thomas Jefferson, we went into this the last time, but just bring you back up to speed. Despite once calling slavery an assemblage of horrors, quote, end quote, owned at least, and I've done some research that said his ownership of slaves was well over 250 or so, but this report said owned at least 175 enslaved workers at one time. This is the beginning, in my view, of the hypocrisy of rhetoric in America, which has stained the consciousness of this country, and it lasts all the way to present. It started back then saying one thing with the mouth, doing another thing with the actions, and while all the time harboring the inequity of black and brown people in these fathers and framers' hearts. The United States may have been founded on the idea that all men were created equal, but during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, again, 1700s, 1800s, slaveholding was common among the statesmen who served as president. All told, at least 12 chief executives or presidents, over a quarter of all American presidents, enslaved people. That is aberrant when you think of it, that over a quarter of the presidents of this country owned slaves. So this is deeply cast into the fabric and the thinking, the consciousness, this inequity, this sense that black and brown people were made by the Creator to be subservient to white America. This is deeply carved into the consciousness and the fabric of our country. Of these, 8 held enslaved people while occupying the office of president in these yet to be United States. The majority of the signers of the Declaration of Independence from England were slavers, because while they were crafting this document to detach themselves from the overuse and misuse of England, back at the plantation, business was conducted as usual. So there was this, what I call hypocrisy in deeds, conflicts of concurrent actions, declaration on the one hand, enslavement of black and brown people on the other at the same time. Again, this is what being American looks like. This is what being an American looks like. Again, we hold these truths, remember, to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which among these are life, liberty, and, of course, the pursuit of happiness. But the question remains, for whom? For whom were these rights, these inalienable rights, crafted? For whom were they designed? For whom were they representing? If enslaved people were being harbored and abused at most of these men's residences, thusly proving that blacks and browns in America were not viewed as their lives mattering as did their white counterparts from the beginning of this country. So let's zero down. Let's drill down even more. Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. The statement Black Lives Matter, in my mind, is one of hopes of equity. When we say matter, we're covering the issue of equity, of equality, value to the same degree, to the same level, to the same scope and score of our white counterparts in every respect, in housing and education, spiritually speaking, because it's amazing to me that black people so seek the valuing of their white counterparts that they are still in droves running to white-led congregations away from black leaders, with only the opportunity to do what we've always done: entertain, sing, and buck dance. For many, it isn't while they disagree with the slogan "All Black Lives Matter," they do agree that black tithes matter. And so they make certain adjustments that are not in the heart, because deeper than this equity that is sought is this inequity that has come from the fathering of this country. And it's amazing. We could just as easily, with a few additional words state Black lives matter to the same degree and equally with white lives in America. That's all we're after. Englishman Thomas Day remarked in 1776, that's a date of note, a year of note, same year the Declaration of Independence was signed, with scorn, and I quote, "If there be an object truly ridiculous in nature, it is an American patriot signing resolutions of independency with the one hand and with the other brandishing a whip over his affrighted slaves," end quote. There is no denying that the patriots who proclaim it self-evident that all men are created equal tolerated black slavery. It is true that the Declaration of Independence, which so stirringly affirms that God endows every human being with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was I'll get this in a minute, was the work of a Virginia planter who owned 200 slaves. And again, these numbers go up and down. This is referring to Thomas Jefferson. For example, of this outcry against slavery on the one hand versus owning slaves on the other, by the same voice, he acknowledged forthrightly and repeatedly that slavery, Thomas Jefferson, was wrong. In his notes on the state of Virginia, end quote, for instance, he characterized slave ownership as, here's another quote, "the most unremitting despotism," end quote, "an outrage bound to provoke divine wrath. Indeed," Jefferson wrote, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever." So he knows that the mindset of this country, the enslavement of the black and brown in America and the egregious mistreatment of these people was wrong, and that at some point God's divine action would cause retribution or reparation for these indolent actions. Let's talk. Race and housing policy have long been intertwined in the United States. So race and the housing policy, I'm shifting gears a bit. Black Americans consistently struggle more than their white counterparts to be approved for home loans, and the specter of redlining, a practice that denied mortgages to people of color in certain neighborhoods, continues to drive down home values in black neighborhoods. So that's been a thorn in the side of people of color in this country, where the miseducation, the segregation, the Jim Crowism affected certain mountains and certain aspects of the experience, of the American experience. Home ownership, bank loans, financing, and redlining, causing certain communities to become devalued, so that even if you were to acquire a home, the value drops so significantly in certain areas, but the more they're occupied by black and brown people, so that even your largest investment typically is your home. Even if you were to resell it, you're cheated again. You can't get ahead again based on these values, because they've knocked down the value of your neighborhood. So if you were to sell, the equity that you should be able to use to get a foot up, open a business, pay off debts, move ahead, enhance your family, pay off tuition, so forth and so on, just isn't there for black and brown people. Even in mixed race and predominantly white neighborhoods, black homeowners say their homes are consistently appraised for less than those of their neighbors, stymieing their path toward building equity. And that's what this country is afraid of, if you'll allow me to use that preposition. Black and brown people ever having a sense of financial equity with their white counterparts, because this is dangerous. This now makes you a viable competitor. We'll get more into it. Stymieing their path toward building equity and further perpetuating income equality in the United States, which is what I just said. Now, here's a specific story. Abena, A-B-E-N-A, and Alex Horton wanted to take advantage of low home refinance rates brought on by the coronavirus crisis. So in June this year, they took the first step in that process, welcoming a home appraiser into their 4-bedroom, 4-bath, ranch-style home in my hometown, which is one of the more lenient areas of that speaking to this racial inequity. And it's always been that way since the Confederacy. Jacksonville, Florida. Specifically Jacksonville, Florida. The Hortons lived just minutes from the Ortega River in a predominantly white neighborhood of 1950s homes that tend to sell for $350,000 to $550,000. They had expected their home to appraise for around $450,000, but the appraiser felt differently, assigning a value. Watch it. Wait for it. For the people in the back of the room. $330,000. They expected their home to appraise for $450,000. The appraiser arrives and assigns a value of $330,000. So that's, what is it, $80,000 difference? Nearly $100,000 difference. Mrs. Horton, who is black, immediately suspected, here it is, discrimination. The couple's bank that's extending the loan, or the intended loan, the couple's bank agreed that the value was off and ordered a second appraisal. But before the new appraiser could arrive, Mrs. Horton, a lawyer, began an experiment. She took all family photos off the mantle. I've lived through this same experience. We'll get to it another time. She took all family photos off the mantle. Instead, she hung up a series of oil paintings of Mr. Horton, her husband, who is white, and his grandparents, white, that had been in storage. Books by Zora Neale Hurston and Toni Morrison, black authors, by the way, were taken off the shelves, and holiday photo cards sent by friends were edited so that only those showing white families were left on the display. On the day of the appraisal, Ms. Horton took the couple's 6-year-old son on a shopping trip to Target and left Mr. Horton, who was white, alone at home to answer the doors. You got to take the mixed mulatto child out because the potential appraiser could see, that this is probably an intermarital cross-ethnic group, cross-race situation. So that's probably going to affect the experiment. So we just leave the pure white man, the husband, at home to field all the questions. New appraiser gave their home, wait for it, for the people across the street, a value of $465,000. Not the $450,000 they thought. Not the $330,000 they were given by the white appraiser who comes, but a real value, $465,000, a more than 40% increase from the first appraisal. This article was taken from the New York Times, published August 25th, 2020. All lives matter. Black lives matter to the same degree. Are we worth the same thing? Do we have to take down all family references to being black where you live in housing that is desirable by any racial group, any ethnic group, and in order to sell, If you are a person of color, black and brown, do you have to disengage from your roots, from your ethnicity, of which and you are proud and proudly associated, in order to sell the home, forget selling it, in order to just have a fair and equitable appraised value? So let's go. Current disparities of inequality affecting people of color. 1 in 5 black families compared to 1 in 10 white families live in food insecurity. So those numbers are almost double. 1 in 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black families compared to 1 in 10 white families live in food insecurity. 4 in 10 black children live in households of poverty, which is double the number of their white counterparts. Black families live in substandard living conditions at nearly twice the rate, again, of white families in America. Black lives matter. All lives matter. To the same value, to the same equality, to the same worth? That's the question. 1 in 5 black men are not in the labor force. Nearly twice that again of all other ethnic groups in these yet to be United States. While blacks and whites use marijuana at nearly the same rate, blacks are more likely to be arrested at nearly, wait for it, 3.5 times that of their white counterparts. Now, that is a very serious demographic, because black and brown people only are about 14% of the population here in these yet to be United States, and whites are 72.6 or 7%. But yet they use marijuana at nearly the same rates the data shows. But when it comes to arrests for the illegal use of marijuana, black and brown people are arrested nearly 3.5 times higher. Those numbers are crazy. That's crazy. That's a crazy statistic. For every dollar earned by a white worker, how much would you think is earned by equal black worker doing the same work? 75 cents. So this means that 25 cent out of in a comparison of black and whites working the same job, where a white man would get $1 for the same work, the black will only get 75 cents. 25 cent. 25%, 25 cent disproportion. How do you ever, you already started behind, you are already limited with opportunities that were given, regardless of your education, regardless of your mental quickness, but then when it comes to earning power, let's keep going. The level of debt of a black college graduate is double that of his or her white college graduate counterpart. The likelihood of an American white woman being arrested in her lifetime is 1 in 111. 1 in 111, while that of her black female counterpart is 1 in 18. All lives matter. Black lives matter to the same degree that white lives matter in this country. A black man over his lifetime has a 1 in 3 chance of being incarcerated, versus that of his white male counterpart being 1 in 17. These numbers are crazy. 50%, and this one really gets my attention. I can't tell you the reason, but it just pulls at my heart. And this is something that, if you're outside of the black and brown community, you really wouldn't understand the struggle that's involved with this, the mental anguish, uh, the aptitude challenges, the fights, the internal struggles, emotional struggles that black and brown people have to deal with before they even walk out of the home every day because of statistics like this one. Hear this. 50% of black children born in poverty will remain in poverty for their lifetime. No, 50% of those black and brown people born beneath the poverty line will remain that way for their lifetime. There's only a 50% chance, a 1 in 2 chance. So for every 2 people you'll see, one of them gets out, one of them stays in, while the numbers on the other side of the fence are staggering. This information was based on data and findings from the Black American Inequities Group. My contention is that the die was cast for these ongoing disproportions by the racist and racial torrid set by the duplicitous actions and the Constitution of the United States set and framed by the fathers of this country. Here's some recent facts I want to get into, and I'll let you tell me. You tell me, do black and brown lives matter to the same degree as white lives in this country? Here are just a few recent facts. August 23rd, Kenosha police officer Rustin Shesky shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. In the back. Now, would that ever happen in the white community? The more heinous criminal would not get this kind of treatment. We took Dylan Roof after shooting 9 African Americans in a South Carolina church. We took him to Burger King because he was hungry. We took the other gentleman in Thomasville, Tennessee, I think it was. He's accused of being a double murderer. And I did a show on him earlier. And we have pictures, photographs of the officers holding the water bottle up, nursing his wounds and quenching his thirst. Do Black Lives Matter to the same degree? That's all we're after in America. So Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back after he walked away from the officers and was attempting to enter a small SUV with his 3 children in the back seat. Cell phone video of the shooting exploded across social media and ignited a firestorm of sometimes violent, destructive protests in Kenosha in the days since. Blake lies in the fraud-hurt hospital paralyzed, waist down. Shesky is on administrative leave, the shooting officer, as state and federal agents investigate the high-profile deaths of a dozen black Americans. I'm going to give you probably more since 2014. We're just going to look since 2014. These are just the tips of the iceberg. These are just tipping points. These are just murders that were enacted by white law enforcement officers, and we know all are not persons who have negative connotations toward people of color, but those who are good need to bring a spoiler alert on those who are not. But because of social media, because everyone's a reporter now, because of telephones that have videoing capabilities, we're just being made aware more broadly, and we are awakened, awareness and being awakened to what has been going on, to the sheer numbers and heinousness that has been going on since slavery in America. Just visit some of the historic places that record the treatment, the mistreatment, ill treatment, maltreatment of people of color in these United States. And I visited several. We took over 200 people from our church to the Smithsonian Institution's institute covering Black history in America. A few years ago, we visited by taking members of our church to the hanging museum in Montgomery, along with another, and I visited across the country. And so I'm just telling you, these are just what I'm going to give you are just a few cases, but these cases have gone on for years by the hundreds. Here's another: fatal encounters, almost all of which were captured on video, so there's no argument here. Rakia Boyd, March 21st, 2012. Chicago police officer Dante Servin resigned in May 2016 after the police superintendent said he should be fired for killing an unarmed Black woman 4 years earlier. So it takes a while to get around. That's another story for another day. Servin was off duty when he shot 22. I'm just going to call the roll. When he shot 22-year-old Rakia Boyd. She had been walking down the street with her friends when he told them, this officer now, white officer to Black youth, told them to be quiet. She's 22 years old. She's an adult. And he fired when he thought he saw a gun. Prosecutors charged Servin with involuntary manslaughter. A judge acquitted him in April 2016, saying he'd been improperly charged. Black Lives Matter. All lives matter to the same equity. Let's call the roll. Eric Gardner, 43, July 2014. Police said they caught Eric Gardner illegally selling loose cigarettes. I don't know if I don't know. You tell me if white lives matter to the same degree as Black lives matter when you lose your life selling cigarettes now. Just selling, not stealing, selling cigarettes. Loose cigarettes on the street corner in Staten Island, and gave him a warning. 2 weeks later, on July 17th, police returned and arrested Garner, alleging he was again breaking the law in an encounter recorded by a bystander. On video, officers grabbed Garner, who was unarmed, and pulled him to the sidewalk. Officer Daniel Pantaleo, who is white, wrapped his arm around Garner's neck. Garner gasped, wailing, "I can't breathe." He was the first one. "I can't breathe," 11 times. Within minutes, he was unconscious. Let's go. Call the roll. Michael Brown, 18. These are all Black victims. August 9th, 2014, in Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown and Officer Darren Wilson encountered one another on a residential street in St. Louis, in the St. Louis suburb. Police said Brown was a suspect in the robbery of cigars. Are you supposed to lose your life for that? It's wrong. If he stole the cigars, okay, that's wrong. He should have been prosecuted. It should have been handled fairly under the boundaries of the law. But he shouldn't lose his life. He shouldn't lose it. He shouldn't have lost his life. If Black lives matter to the same degree that all lives matter, we will be hearing more about this in the white community. And we don't. Notice now, here we are. Police said Brown was a suspect in the robbery of cigars from a convenience store. Wilson shot and killed the teenager who was unarmed. Call the roll. Laquan Mcdonald, 17. October 20th, 2014, police officers in Chicago encountered Laquan Mcdonald after responding to a report of someone trying to break into vehicles. Police began following McDonald, who was carrying a knife, and used it to slash a police car's tire. When Officer Jason Van Dyke, who is white, arrived at the scene, he got out of his car and started shooting, striking McDonald, count them, 16 times. Police dashboard camera footage of the shooting showed that the 17-year-old was moving away from Van Dyke when he began firing, but the video footage remained hidden by Chicago officials for more than a year. Black lives matter to the same degree, same equity, same law enforcement, same protection under the law. Are the scales of justice the same? Tamir Rice, 12, That's the number after 11. 12. On November 22nd, 2014, a caller to 911 in Cleveland, that's Ohio, reported someone near a recreation center playing with a gun and scaring people. The caller said the gun was probably fake, quote unquote. This is what the caller said on the 911 call, and noted that the person with it was probably a child. Police responded, and within seconds of arriving, Officer Timothy Lohman jumped out of his car and opened fire, striking 12-year-old Tamir Rice, killing him. The shooting was captured on surveillance video. Rice had been playing with a pellet gun. Authorities later said the information from the call that it was likely he was a child playing with a fake weapon, hear it, had not been passed along to the responding officers. Grand jury declined to indict the two officers who responded. Walter Scott, just calling the roll, 50. On April 4th, 2014, Michael Slager, a white police officer in South Carolina, pulled over Walter Scott's vehicle for a routine traffic stop in North Charleston. Scott ran, and Slager chased him into a nearby lot. At one point, a bystander began recording the encounter from a cell telephone. The video captured Slager firing his gun at Scott as he fled, running away from him. I'm not condoning fleeing from the police officer. I'm not trying to make right wrong. I won't do that. Right is right and wrong is wrong, but you shouldn't lose your life. That's the reason you have the law. That's the reason you have prisons and jails. That's the reason you have a penal system, not for vigilantism. Not for officers taking the law in their own hands, and especially not to the degree that they're taking this in their own hands as it relates to people of color consistently across these yet to be United States. Notice this. During the trial, Slager testified that he had tried to subdue Scott and said he feared for his life because Scott grabbed his taser during the struggle. The jury deadlocked in December 2016. Prosecutors said they would retry him, but Slager pleaded guilty to a federal civil rights charge as a part of a deal to resolve both cases. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Sandra Bland, this one hurts. All of them do, but some particularly are tearjerkers for me and emotional grabbers. Was a 28-year-old African-American woman who was found hanged in a jail cell in Waller County, Texas on July 13th, 2015, 3 days after being arrested during a pretextual traffic stop. Her death was ruled a suicide. Now, I'm just going to give you a little stop on that because that's a very involved case and so many questions came out of the Sandra Bland issue. Samuel Dubois, 43, just calling the roll here. July 19, 2015, a University of Cincinnati police officer pulled over a car driven by Samuel Dubois, depending on where you're from, near the school's campus for failing to display a front license plate. It's a northern thing. Officer Ray Tenzing approached the car and soon opened fire, killing Dubois. Tenzing, who is white, told investigators he was forced to shoot because he was being dragged by the car. In a video recorded by Tenzing's body camera, the officer could be heard telling Dubois to take off his seatbelt. Dubois then started the car, and Tenzing yelled for Dubois to stop. The officer pushed his gun through the open car window and shot Dubois in the head. The car rolled forward before coming to a stop down the street. So now timing is the issue. The video showed you weren't being dragged until you shot the man in the head, and because of his unconsciousness, he now cannot control the vehicle, and you're being dragged after you murdered someone. Now, the actions that these persons took when they were wrong, but they should have been tried equitably and fairly like anybody else in this quote unquote free country. Prosecutors charged Tenzing with murder. Joe Dieters, the Hamilton County prosecutor, said at the time that his office had looked at more than 100 police shootings. Du Bois' death was the first, he said, where they concluded this is without question a murder. Tenzing's attorney, watch it now, said the officer feared for his life. Prosecutors tried this white officer twice, but juries deadlocked in 2016 and 2017. Freddie Gray, 25, just calling the roll. April 12, 2015, Freddie Gray was arrested by Baltimore police officers who said he had a switchblade. Video shot by bystanders showed officers dragging Gray, moaning in pain, toward a police wagon and helping him into the vehicle. This one is horrendous. By the time they had arrived at the police station, Gray was not breathing. Gray died a week later after suffering severe, here it is, spinal injuries. You're not supposed to have spinal injuries from riding to headquarters or to the police station in a police vehicle, police cruiser. No, something else happened because the injuries don't lie. That a medical examiner said were sustained as he was being transported to the police station during the ride. The driver, Caesar R. Goodson Jr., stopped to put Gray in leg restraints, but Gray was not secured with a seatbelt or offered medical attention despite his requests, police officials said. Days later, the 6 officers involved, Goodson, William Porter, Garrett Miller, Edward Nero, Brian Rice, and Alicia White, were suspended without pay because of his death. Gray's death spurred weeks of protests against police brutality. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide, and Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn J. Mosby announced charges against the 6th police officer. A judge declared a mistrial for Porter. After a jury deadlocked on the charges, prosecutors eventually dropped charges against Porter, Miller, and White. Rice was acquitted of involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and misconduct in office. Goodson was found not guilty of second-degree depraved heart murder, 3 counts of manslaughter, misconduct in office, and reckless endangerment. Nero was acquitted of misdemeanor charges of second-degree assault, reckless endangerment, and misconduct in office. Everybody was acquitted, and they were allowed to return to work. Black Lives Matter, to the same equity, the same equitable treatment, the same value, the same worth as white lives in America, and you don't want anyone to speak out against this? Alton Sterling, 37, July 5th, 2016. Police officers in Baton Rouge shot and killed Alton Sterling. It's just too much. Let me just end. There are more. I'll pick this up next week. There's so many more. I can't close this the way I want to close it. So here, let's just resolve this. Let's resolve this. What can we do? What can we do to resolve this seeming inequity of value and worth between the races? One, I must say this, Jesus is the answer for all world problems and conflicts. Now, that may not work for everyone, but I'm telling you, if you'll put your faith in Jesus and have some teaching, some training that is valid and valuable and accurate from the scriptures, Jesus will change your life. Now, I'm duty bound to share that one with you. He leads to peace via the Holy Spirit and revelation knowledge. He has knowledge above the clouds that will change every situation beneath the clouds. Okay, that's given. Secondly, how do we resolve any type of ignorance, any type of undervalue, any type of inequity, any type of an imbalance? How does a coach bring a player up to speed? How does a piano instructor, bring someone who knows nothing about the 88 keys into the world of music via piano? How do you train anything? Well, you do it through education. You do it through repetition. Schools, homes, schools, churches must become opportunistic in upgrading all races regarding intrinsic value. This has to be modeled and taught repetitively. If you can teach a dog, I was speaking with a police officer at one of the campuses last week, and he breeds German Shepherds, and he was showing me his papers and his certifications for breeding, and even dogs he sold and how much he sold them for, and how they can be trained to do this and to do that. If a dog can be trained and brought up to a certain value, he showed me a vehicle that was purchased by the selling of one animal based on the dog's pedigree from the animal's father. Well, if an animal can be trained out of something and into something else, humans can be trained. But that's just it. There's a training involved. There's the involvement of time, experiences. Instruction must come from people who know, and not misinstruction from people who think they know. We've had enough of whitewash history. We've had enough of people taking history. And I search for my words because I don't want to come off as angry. I want to come off as a person who addresses true problems and brings true solutions. So I'll leave it at that. We must seize educational opportunities. My hour is up. I need to close here, so let's just go here. Business philosopher Jim Rohn, we give this to you every time. Sincerity is not a test of truth. We must not make this mistake. He must